واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة العين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك لله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد يا أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا ولي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك لله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا ساداتي يا مواليني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله فأستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا ساداتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله الظالمين ومن الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Tuesday night program with Dua Tawassul and inshallah brief Tafsir of Quran. Just a quick clarification that in the email you might have seen Tuesday night adjustion. There's no adjustion. It was a misprint or a typo. I guess carried over from the last week's email, which there was adjustion, and therefore that was a misunderstanding. Tomorrow, inshallah, as a reminder, we will have the majlis to commemorate the shahadat of Khatun Jannat, Janab Fatmatul Zahra, Salamullahi alayha, inshallah. The program will start at 7 p.m. with Salatul Isha, followed by So Salam Marthiya, and inshallah Majlis Aza. Of course, there are 2 dates for the shahadat of this great lady. One of them is on the 13th of Jamad al-Ula, which is the night, tomorrow night. And the next will be on the 3rd of Jamad al-Akhira, inshallah, which will be falling around December 25th, 26th. Around that time, we will have a series of majalis to commemorate Fatimiyya, inshallah, at that time. Tonight, very quickly, we are on chapter number 96, as we've been doing the tafsir of these surahs from the 30th juz of Quran. Last week, we did surah number 95, and that was Surah Wat-Teen, and tonight, Surah Iqra. This chapter, of course, is important from many aspects. One of the importance of this chapter is that it was the first revelation on Rasulullah, which is proven through many ahadith from Aimma Athhar, that at the age of 40, when the prophetic mission for Rasulullah began, when he was mab'uth bi-risala, he used to retreat to the cave of Hira for meditation, for ibadat. For 40 days, he would go on the cave of Hira and he would spend 40 days there doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that ibadat was emerging primarily because of the situation of the Quraysh that Rasulullah was seeing, which was disheartening, how people were worshipping different idols and they were leading a life which lacked any substance in it. And therefore, Rasulullah would get worried about the state and the affairs of the people. And in order to pray and seclude himself from all that negative environment, Rasulullah would retreat for 40 days or 40 nights, and he would stay in the cave of Hira. Of course, the 2 people that were in contact with him while he was in Hira was his wife, Bibi Khadija, salamullahi alayha, and Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. Imam mentions this in khutbah of Nahj al-Balagha, where he says this explicitly, that the first revelation that came upon Rasulullah was this surah. Now there's a debate amongst the scholars whether the first 5 ayats were revealed or the entire chapter was revealed. According to the riwayat from our 8th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rada, alayhi salatu wasalam, Thamin al-Hijaj, he said, أول ما نزل or أول ما نزل إلى رسول الله اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق وآخر ما نزل عليه إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح. So from that aspect, we understand that when Imam is mentioning that the first that was revealed on Prophet was Iqra, and the last that was revealed on Prophet was إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ, which tells us that the entire surah was revealed to Rasulullah. And of course, this was not news to him, although it did come as a moment where Jibreel Amin comes and asks Rasulullah, Iqra. Rasulullah says, وَمَا أَنَا بِقَارِئ. And so he responded by saying, I don't know what to read, and I'm not a reciter. He said, Iqra again. Rasulullah repeated the same thing. And when he said the Iqra 3rd time, he says, these words then came to my tongue. And then Jibreel taught him these words, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Rabb, in your name of your nourisher, your Lord, the one who created you. Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram. Read, because your Rabb is akram, generous. Alladhi allama bil qalam, the one who taught mankind with pen. Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam, taught mankind which they did not know. And of course, towards the end of the surah, where there are 19 ayat in it. Of course, our tafsir on Tuesday nights have been very abridged. So we've been doing the summary of the surah without going in the in-depth analysis of every single ayah and looking at the various aspects of the different words that are used in it. The name of the surah comes from the 2nd ayat, which is Alaq. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaq al-insana min alaq. The one who created insan from a clot of blood. So the word alaq means clinging mass. It means clotted blood, worm. And also the word iqra sometimes is named as the name of the surah. So sometimes the surah is referred to as iqra, sometimes the surah is referred to as alaq. But more commonly it is known as al-alaq. The first words that were revealed to the Prophet were these: Iqra bismika rabbika allazi khalaq, read in the name of your Lord. The surah has 19 ayats, 72 words, and 280 letters in it. Surah Al-Alaq is placed at number 96 in the current order of the surahs in Quran, but from the aspect of the chronological revelation of Quran, this placed at number 1. This is the first surah which was revealed to the Prophet. An overview of the surah: there's a reminder about Tawheed. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of the Lord who created you. So the word khaliq is being mentioned, and we know that as far as the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned, Tawheed refers to the khaliqiyyat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His af'al, His dhat, and as well as His sifat. So Tawheed, meaning that Allah is unique and one and does not have any partners, refers to the fact that Allah is bila sharik in His attributes, in His sifat, in His actions, and all of these things that are mentioned in it. So the number one is the reminder about Tawheed. Second, we find the recognizing the position of knowledge and pen. That is also being introduced over here, that how important knowledge and the pen is. And the third is the relationship between capitalism and rebellion. That when you get to the state where you start buying and selling and spending and you start earning and you have a lot in with you, right away there's this rebellion that comes into insan, as the ayah towards the middle talks about it, when it says, Kalla, innal insana la yatgha. Yatgha, that he does tagha from tughyan, which means rebellion. When does he do that? An ra'ahu istaghna. When he sees himself to be what? Self-sufficient. I have enough riches. I don't need anyone. And therefore this concept of being affluent and rich, and the concept of having and the power to buy anything, do anything, to be able to control everything, that leads to what? That leads to rebellion. And there are examples of that. Qarun is an example of that. Fir'aun is an example of that. Shaddad is an example of that, which Quran highlights on other places as well. So this was an overview. Objectives and the lessons that we can derive is the objectives are very clear from the very beginning of the surah. Reminder of Tawheed and the creator of the universe, creator of mankind, an awareness of the good and the bad ways that are in front of mankind. So you got two paths. Imma shakiran wa imma kafura. So you got these two paths in front of you. Either you are thankful and grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you are ungrateful. Inshallah, we'll go into some of the explanation of the words and the ayat at the end. Content and the topics that this surah discusses. Surah starts out by instructing the Prophet to read. So that highlights the instructions that are given to Prophet is not only solely for him, because not everything that is mentioned in Quran is explicitly to Rasulullah. There are certain ahkamat that are mentioned in Quran which are explicitly to Rasulullah. But there's no harm in us doing it. But majority of the things that are revealed are for all of us. For example, you'd say, what is it that is not for us? It is only exclusive for Rasulullah. When there's a concept of marriage, it comes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it. That some privileges that were given to Rasulullah as far as marriage is concerned, that is something which is explicitly to him. Number two, when Allah says, Ya ayyuhal muzammil qumil layl illa qalila, when he talks about making asa rabbuka an yab'athaka maqaman mahmuda, when the concept of salatul tahajjud or salatul layl is mentioned, it is explicit order to Rasulullah that it is an obligation on him and not on anyone else. But it is mustahab for us to also go ahead and do these things. So Allah begins this surah by instructing Prophet to read and recite the Quran. After that, highlights the exalted place of humans. That you as human beings are not lowly creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are the highest and the exalted, most exalted creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Albeit created with a worthless clot of blood, but Allah makes you to be the most virtuous of all of His creations. In the next stage, He discusses the evolution of man in the light of God's grace and mercy, how insan can prosper in the light of the grace and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his familiarity with science and knowledge. So, taught with pen, taught with knowledge. In the next stage, he talks about ungrateful people. So, as the surah moves on, talks about those who are ungrateful. After having, despite all the blessings and the honors that Allah has bestowed upon them, they still hold on to the path of rebellion. They start doing what is called tughyan. And finally, it refers to the painful punishment of those who hinder people's guidance. So there are certain people, they don't want to be guided, and then they become what? Mani' from the hidayat of other individuals. That if you don't want to be guided, that's fine, step aside. But you're going to become an obstacle, hindrance in as far as the guidance of other individuals is concerned as well. And of course, good deeds and amal neek. So, you have the ability to do good. You don't do good. While you're not doing good, what are you going to do? You're going to stop others from doing good as well. Why? You don't want to be the only person not doing good. I remember this vividly after 9/11. Of course, it was very difficult for many Muslims living in this part of the world. New York, New Jersey area was highly affected. Not only just the Muslims were targeted and there was Islamophobia on the rise, but even those who looked like Muslims, they were also targeted. So you see a lot of these Sikhs who are owners of many of these gas stations. They wear turban, they have beards, and they resemble, a Muslim as far as the appearance is concerned. They received a lot of negativity and a lot of hate and bigotry from the public here because they were confused being as Muslims. So they started writing boards on their walls saying, "We are not Muslims, don't attack us. We haven't done anything. Go after those who are responsible for this attack, 9/11. But then I remember also that once I was visiting a school to give a speech, and there was a question that was raised. A man came and he said, Maulana, our daughters are now under, of course, surveillance and observation, because you can see, as men, we don't have to observe the hijab, apparent hijab, and we're not really in the spotlight. But women who are observing hijab, Muslim women, they can easily be spotted. And they could easily be a target of this sort of, bigotry. Therefore, he said, we should tell our daughters to stop observing hijab. We should tell everyone. I told my daughters, that man said to me, he said, I told my daughter, you don't have to wear hijab. Why? Because otherwise you will be picked upon and you will be harmed. It is possible that someone might harm you. So he said, well, let's just make it general for every Muslim girl to. I said, well, can't go ahead and do that and tell everyone to stop observing hijab just because you have stopped it out of precaution. So there were a lot of this sort of concept where person himself does something, wants everyone else to jump on the bandwagon as well, so that the elements of doing that action becomes what justified in their minds. This chapter ends with the instruction of prostration and seeking nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Features and the specialties and reward of reciting the surah, there are many. Ubay ibn Ka'ab narrates from the Prophet who said, whoever recites this surah, it is as if he has recited all the chapters of this category. Remember in the beginning we talked about there are different categories of surahs in Quran. There are surahs which are called Tawal, the long chapters. And then there was another set of surahs which were Me'ain, those who were 100 ayat each or more. And then there were surahs which were called, Mufassal, meaning the shorter surahs which were divided by Bismillahs in between. So Surah Al-Alaq is amongst the Mufassal surahs. And therefore, if you recite the surah, it is as if you have recited all the Mufassal surahs as well. That's the benefit of it. Number two, Muhammad ibn Hassan narrates from 6th Imam, who said, if a person recites this chapter on a particular day and night, and then he dies on the same day. So for example, you recited on Thursday and you died on Thursday, he has attained martyrdom. The fact that he recited this surah on the same day his death takes place, he has died as a martyr. So this tells you what? If you see someone who's on the deathbed, go ahead and tell them. Make them read this surah. Recite this surah for them. Make them read this surah so they can repeat these words. Why? If they're going to go ahead and die this same very day, they will be at least counted amongst those who are the martyrs. Also, if you recited it, you're like those who attained martyrdom while fighting alongside Rasulullah. Prophet said in a similar tradition as before, with the addition that whoever recites this surah on a body of water, for example, you're traveling by an ocean, you're in a river, you're in a lake or something, Allah will, and whoever recites it in the body of water, Allah will prevent this person from drowning. Now don't go out there and try this, that you jump into an Atlantic Ocean and you say, well, I'm going to recite Surah Al-Alaq. Allah will prevent me from drowning. No, this is only in the stages when you're definitely in need. When there's no option left and you are in the midst of it and you're drowning, recite this surah. Definitely, it will prevent you from drowning. Meaning what? It'll bring some sort of help which will stop and prevent you from drowning, for example. So that's what it's meant over here. Also, whoever recites this at the door of their store or their storehouse, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep it safe for its owner from any calamity and theft. Time and the place of revelation, Surah Al-Alaq, of course, was revealed in Makkatul Mukarramah. This is the first surah in the first year of the Bi'athat of Rasulullah, beginning of his prophetic mission. The atmosphere, at least the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Alaq, as I mentioned before, were revealed. Rasulullah would retreat to the cave of Hira, looking at the environment which was drowning into their, lack of knowledge and lack of any social ethics that existed at that time. People did not have care for one another, and everyone was running after the riches and whatnot, and there were persecution going on to those who were weak, and nobody was taking care of the yatim and the miskin and the destitute. That was sort of like the condition of the city of Mecca at that time. Rasulullah would feel worried about the state of affairs of the people, and he would retreat to the cave of Hira, and in that atmosphere Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins the prophetic mission. Therefore, preparing Rasulullah for receiving more revelations and pointing out the difficulties that lie ahead. So while I'm reciting these surahs, this ayat to you, I'm beginning your bi'sat right now. Does not mean that things will end right away. You will have to go ahead and carry out the job of making and bringing about a change. According to the author of Al-Mizan, Allama Tabatabai, he said the entire surah was revealed together due to the strong connection between the ayat of this surah. So all 19 ayat are very closely connected with one another. That tells you that the entire surah was revealed altogether. Features. Surah Al-Alaq is amongst the Azaim, meaning the chapters with obligatory sajdah in it, prostration. So whoever reads or hears the last verse of this surah, sajdah becomes wajib. So if I recite this surah ayat right now, the last ayat, not the entire surah, I can recite the first 18 ayat, no sajdah on you. If I recite the last ayat 19, you will all have to do what? Sajdah. That sajdah is wajib. Of course, there is no ahkam for that sajdah, that you have to have wudu, that you have to face qibla and all those things. Then you can just go ahead and do sajdah. And no specific dhikr is mentioned. You can recite anything. Yes, there's a dhikr from 8th Imam regarding this as well. There are 3 other chapters where you find wajib sajdah. So Surah Al-Alaq, chapter 96 is one. Surah Hamim Sajdah, chapter 32. Surah Fussilat, chapter 41. Surah Najm, chapter 53. These are the 4 places where you have wajib. Now there are many mustahab sajdas in Quran. You don't have to do sajda after them, but after these ayat, it is an obligation. For example, if you're listening to a tape, a CD of Surah Al-Alaq, driving down, you put it on YouTube, for example, a recitation of your favorite qari, you play and Surah Al-Alaq comes. If you hear the ayat, last ayat, is there sajda wajib upon you? No. There's no wajib sajda upon you upon hearing it from a recording. It has to be live. It has to be either in person, or you hear it, or you read it yourself. But if you listen to the recording of it, then there's no sajda upon you. Also worth mentioning that reciting any of these surahs, 4 surahs, Surah Najm, Surah Fussilat, Surah Sajdah, and Surah Alaq, in our salat is not permissible. According to Fiqh Ja'fari, you cannot recite any of these 4 surahs in your daily salat. Because reciting the last ayah makes sajda wajib. You cannot skip it. When you do sajda in salat, you've added a rukun to salat. Adding a rukun, which is an obligatory rukun, what does it do? Makes salat batil. So you have 11 wajibat in salat, 5 of them are rukun. What are those 5? Takbiratul ihram, the niyyah, ruku', sujood, and qiyam. These 5 are rukun salat. Meaning you add, subtract, you do it on purpose or by forgetfulness, your salat becomes batil. So if you add another sajda to it, you're adding a rukun and your salat will become batil. Therefore, do not recite. Luckily, we don't know these surahs because they're so long, so we don't recite them in our salat anyway. Also, one must not recite these 4 ayat of sajda, in the state of ritual impurity. Person in the state of janaba, women in the state of haid, they cannot recite these 4 ayat. It is haram to recite these ayat. Now, some people think that when you're in the state of ritual impurity, you cannot recite Quran at all. Women in the state of ritual impurity, they cannot recite Quran at all. No, you can recite Quran. Up to 7 ayat, you get thawab. After 7 ayat, there's no thawab. So, but you can still recite it. You can't touch the Quran, so you can recite it off, for example, an iPad or any other screen where you're not touching the pages or the surah itself. Even if you use the mushaf, don't touch the ayat, and you can still recite the Quran. So you don't have to leave reciting the Quran just because you are in the state of ritual impurity. Yeah, definitely, la yamassuhu illal mutahharun. So be in the state of purity when you go ahead and recite Quran. Therefore, if you make wudu to recite Quran, with the same wudu, you can go ahead and perform your salat as well, because there's a reason for doing that wudu. When Allah talks about the creation of mankind, He introduces Himself as Kareem. He says what? Ya ayyuhal insan ma gharraka bi rabbikal kareem alladhi khalaqaka fasawwaka fa'adalak. So when Allah created insan, He called Himself to be what? Kareem. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses about knowledge and learning and about the pen, Allah introduces Himself as Akram. Right here in this surah, He says what? Iqra wa rabbukal akram. When He created insan, He said, I'm Kareem, I'm generous. When He taught you with pen and with knowledge, He said, I am Akram, I'm most generous. So here you understand the emphasis Islam has as far as knowledge is concerned. Your creation was good. Allah is Kareem. But teaching you the knowledge, Allah is Akram, the most generous. The secret in the command to read is that what's revealed isn't only for understanding. So you say, well, Quran is only for understanding. Yes, true. But it is also worth reading. So you should also make an effort of reciting. Amirul Mu'mineen, and I'll conclude with this. Imam al-Muttaqin Ali ibn Abi Talib ﷺ said, he said, the fruit of knowledge is the worship of God. The beginning of this surah was the command to read and teach with a pen. And the end is sajdah, prostration, and qurb of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is useful knowledge, is knowledge that leads us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, the way to get close to Allah includes all the things that are done with the intention of getting closer and closer to Allah. But prostration is the best way to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It means in the surah, the word kalla is mentioned 3 times. That is, illusions and baseless ideas should be avoided. Imam Rada said, referring to the last verse, that the closest state of man to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the state of prostration. So the first surah that is revealed to Rasulullah is Iqra. The second surah that is revealed to Rasulullah is Noon wal Qalam. Meaning what? Quran wants you to read and Quran wants you to write. Reading and writing is kinaya, metaphor used for what? Used for attaining knowledge. And of course, if you have knowledge, Iqra, and you're still arrogant, then this knowledge is wasted. But if you have knowledge and you do sajdah, then you are humble. Meaning what? The close connection of knowledge is to make you humble. When you attain knowledge, humility and humbleness should come in you, and that's the purpose behind the surah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and ability to ponder in the ayat of Quran and make Quran to be the part of our daily lives. Wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Sallallahu Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. Before ziyarat, another reminder that tomorrow, inshallah, we will have the majlis to commemorate the shahadat of Janab Fatmatul Zahra, salamullah alayha. Tomorrow program will start at 7 p.m. sharp with Salatul Isha. And inshallah, we will have Salam Marthiya followed by majlis. Please do attend with your families. Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah, assalamu alaikum ya Nabi Allah, assalamu alaikum ya Habib Allah, assalamu alaikum ya Khiratullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, assalamu alaikum ya Aba Abdullah, assalamu alaikum ibn Rasulullah, assalamu alaikum wa ala jaddika wa abika wa ala ummika wa akhika wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum ya Gharib al-Ghuraba, assalamu alaikum ya Mu'in al-Du'afa wal-Fuqara, assalamu alaikum ya Shams al-Shumus wa Anis al-Nufus, ayyuha al-Madfun bi'arzatus, Ali ibn Musa Rada wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. Assalamu alaikum imam al-insi wal jan. Assalamu alaikum sharik al-Quran. Ajjal Allahu ta'ala farajak wa sahhal Allahu makhrajak wa dhuhurak wa ja'alana min awanik wa ansarik wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.